All right, joining me now, she's a fantastic correspondent over at PBS's NewsHour, and that's Lisa Desjardins. Lisa, Mike Leon, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast with me.
Really glad to be here.
Well, first off, Lisa, I'm so glad I pronounced your last name properly. We were talking about this off air about the hockey reference. So shout out to people who are going to kill me. I mispronounce names all the time wrong on this show, but I got one right so far.
Eric Desjardins, that's right.
That's right. Lisa, the reason we had you on, we've been talking a little bit about the debt ceiling battle. We recently had Deepa Shivaram from NPR on talking about this, and this was a few weeks back. And there's been some recent developments, obviously, that has just come out. President Biden was supposed to go to a trip to Australia and New Zealand. He has since canceled that trip. What's the latest that you can share for our audience in terms of the negotiations, the ongoing battle, and what truly is at stake if we don't reach a deal by June 1st?
That's a lot to cover, but those are the right questions. Exactly. Where we are right now is actually a better moment than I expected to be at today. We've covered a lot of these fiscal standoffs, and my rule of thumb is they usually break down twice, once at the beginning and then once near the end. And I thought we were going to have that sort of, big breakdown in talks yesterday, but we didn't. What we got instead was the White House giving Kevin McCarthy something that he wanted, which was just one-on-one talks to take out the other leaders of the Capitol, Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate leader, Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic House leader, take them out of the mix, Chuck Schumer, the Democratic Senate leader, and just focus on really the two main power centers in Washington right now, Republicans running the House and Democrats running the White House. So now we're going to have their two staffs conducting more focused talks. And really what I think is happening here, Mike, is these are the real negotiations starting now. This is the actual getting down to it. Can they make a deal? Now, all that said, they are very far apart in terms of what each side wants or what each side feels they can give. We can go through all of that, but it's going to be difficult, I think, reaching a final deal. I think a lot of us can kind of sketch out what one could look like, but it's going to be very tricky building these coalitions because everything that's a compromise will take away votes from each side. Each side loses something when they give and the compromise. So that balance and all of the close margins we have here at the Capitol is going to be tricky to get to. What's at stake is rather monumental. This is an unprecedented situation. Should we actually default on the U.S. debt, if we should actually crash into the debt ceiling, as I call it, that's never happened. So, you can read all the analysis you want. The truth is no one really knows exactly what would happen or how fast it would happen. One thing we know for sure is that the federal government would not have enough money to pay all of its bills. So in some way, somebody would have to decide what bills get paid, which ones do not. Do we pay our creditors first? Do we pay our bills on the loans first? Some people think that's what Treasury would do. Do we pay people in programs like Social Security who paid into that? Do we do that first? Do we keep government employees paid? So what we could see very quickly is the shuttering of some government agencies, the furloughing of government workers, changes in benefits. Anyone receiving Social Security, Medicare, doctors, maybe their payments would be affected. Medicaid, that could be affected. We really don't know. And that's just on the domestic side. So that could have a huge economic effect and individual effect here. But the U.S., as I know everybody watching this knows, we have the world's core currency. And our debt is seen as perhaps the most reliable in the entire world. Should it no longer be reliable, then that changes the equations and would have sort of not just a ripple, but potentially a tsunami effect across markets around the world. Now, it would depend. Would we reach default when we're very close to a deal? Does it seem like a deal's about to happen? Or would it be a default with just this epic standoff? I think where we're at matters a lot, but no matter what, if we do default, it would have very serious consequences for Americans and for the world.
Lisa, I'm so glad you kind of alluded to something that I was going to ask you as a follow-up, because the differences I've heard on other political podcasts and across the news spectrum has been about 2011 and that battle between Barack Obama and Speaker of the House at the time, John Boehner. So I would love for you to take us a little bit inside of like what are the key differences between that battle and when it got negotiated, and how our credit rating was affected versus what's happening
Right,
now. Because it seems like at least back then it was operating in good faith, let's say. Whereas
right.
right now we have a Speaker of the House that's kind of being held hostage a little bit by the Freedom Caucus part of his party. So can you take our audience into like the subtle differences between both of those battles? You've been covering this for so long. Nobody
Right.
better, more expertise than you to kind of weigh in on it.
Well, I'll tell you right off the bat, I think that House Republicans and Kevin McCarthy would differ over the held hostage language. I could see someone using that language, but I think they would say instead, so what's happened is the Freedom Caucus, they have leveraged their votes, and a smaller group of them, really just the 20 or so holdouts from the Speaker McCarthy votes, they've leveraged their power in this close margin House to change the way House Republicans do things. And I think it is actually fair to say that almost the entire House Republican conference likes the way things are going right now in terms of the way the conference is being run. There's more people have more input. Now, all that said, I think also what you're talking about is that Speaker McCarthy allowed a rule to pass whereby any single member of his conference can raise a vote to kick him out. So if somebody is not happy, if he forges a deal, say with Democrats that poor conservatives don't like, they could hold a vote to kick him out. And that certainly is a sword over his head. But for now, I do think, honestly, McCarthy is not doing something at the behest of someone else so much as they are all kind of leading together in sort of a new system. It's a little bit chaotic, but it's sort of working harder. There's more dialogue. There's more digging into the dirt of policy on the Republican side than I've seen before. So all that said, anyway, so we're talking about 2011. I think the biggest difference, Mike, between now and 2011 is that the 2011 debt negotiations began in earnest, I think January or February of that year, and we ended up with a solution. I think we were hitting the debt ceiling in the very beginning of August. So we're talking about 7 or 8 months that they had to work on this and to really build the deal. In this situation, we've had a silent, cold standoff with really not any significant talks until perhaps just the last day. We've had, some kind of two cordial meetings, but even that, they really started this process much, much later than we saw in 2011. So it's a test of this new idea of how to do things. Really, that groundwork for that was laid by the White House. The Biden White House took a lesson from 2011 in that they believe the Obama-Biden White House at that time perhaps engaged too much and too early and gave the Republicans too much of a runway to say, yeah, the debt ceiling should be negotiable. The debt ceiling should be something that we use to talk about other fiscal issues. And I think that it was very stressful and difficult. They did come out with a deal that capped some spending levels, did some other things in the end. But I think the lesson that Vice President Biden and his team took away from that was that the White House engaged too much. And so this time around, what we saw from the Biden White House is that no, we're going to keep you not just arm's distance, but we're not even going to talk about raising the debt ceiling as related to anything else. We're going to keep that off the table as long as we can. We all knew that in the end, it was going to be a question of could House Republicans actually pass anything to say what it was that they wanted? Could they pass a bundle of things that showed they have enough support for some kind of combination bill? And they did. When Speaker McCarthy got those 217 votes for that, for their bill, which would cut spending, also raise work requirements, permitting reform, has a bunch of things in it. It's basically their opening offer. When he was able to pass that through his conference, to the surprise and shock of many Democrats, it changed how this negotiation was going to go. It forced the hand of Democrats because they have not been able to pass anything. There are not enough votes in the Senate right now for a clean debt ceiling increase, which is what Democrats want. That is due to Republicans in the Senate, but regardless, Democrats still can't pass something. So that really evened out, I think, the negotiating postures. And while I think the Biden White House was thinking they could make it, maybe all the way to the debt ceiling deadline without having to really deal with McCarthy, that changed in the last couple of weeks when the House Republicans were able to pass their bill. And now that we're getting close to the deadline, everyone realizes that this is a serious situation, that if they're not careful, they could accidentally stumble into default. So I think that timeline is just so different. What's interesting is right now that timeline pressure seems to be helping. Sometimes it hurts, but at this moment, it seems like there are serious people in the room that are really trying to figure out what they can do.
Well, you fed into the follow up perfectly because speaking of slim margins, it's almost as if you have my script here that I'm asking you
Hey.
questions. Lisa, Dianne Feinstein, Senator Feinstein, we've been talking about her a little bit on the program. Obviously, I know she recently appeared in the halls of Congress. She claims she's been able to fulfill her duties, although obviously she's been absent for the past few months and on a few different key votes. What are you hearing from Democrats? What's your read on whether or not Democrats are going to get behind calling for her to step down? And ultimately, what does happen with her? I know obviously her seat is up in 24, but what do you think will happen between now and then?
Let's see. I have not seen Senator Feinstein since she's returned to the Senate just a couple of days ago, so I haven't had the chance for myself to take stock of it, how, if she's different than before she left, or what she's like. We know she's in a wheelchair. We know that her health is fragile. So her staff themselves sent out a statement from her saying that she continues to have balance issues, among other issues, as a result of her shingles infection and complications. It's clear from photos of her and video of her, other colleagues who have run into her at the Capitol, that she really, it seemed like, survived a potentially life-threatening blow here. I don't know that medically, but it is clear that what happened to her was very serious medically. And it is a testament, I think, to her stamina. Other people would say to how stubborn she is, that she has decided to stay in office. Democrats, to be honest, are divided about it. There are some who, before she returned, there were growing cries to say that she needed to step down because her vote on the Senate Judiciary Committee was decisive and would have been decisive in getting some nominees through. And those nominees were backing up. They were frozen because she wasn't here. So there were increasing calls for her to step down. She had to come back, or else I think her job was in jeopardy. Even now, though, she's not attending every vote. She really seems to be attending votes either when she feels up to it or when she absolutely is necessary for Democrats to pass things. There are many Democrats who just don't really want to talk about it. They don't feel like it's a polite thing, that it is. She was elected by her state. And when she was elected by her state, there were already stories of questioning her age, questioning her capacity, but Californians still elected her. And there are some Democrats who say, the voters of California, it was their decision. There is also the factor that there's a tremendous amount of respect for Dianne Feinstein. She was a pioneering, not just female lawmaker, but like lawmaker of all types, especially on issues like guns, violence, those things she has been, and intelligence. Also the U.S. posture toward war. These are things that she's had major influence on, and she was kind of a pillar here in the Senate. Now, I will say her decision to stay has undermined that legacy, I believe. While she still has a lot of respect, people aren't talking about her legacy as much as they're talking about, should she stay? She has decided to stay. We don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. Maybe being back will make her take stock of whether it's working for her to be back or not. But, I've covered many, many lawmakers, usually it is senators, who reach the older ages of health and just are, and I'm Dianne Feinstein, again, I haven't had a chance to talk to her, so I can't comment on what she is like at this moment. There was an interview yesterday that indicated she really didn't seem to understand the questions that were being asked her. But I will say I have had conversations with many, many other senators who were 80, 90 years old, who, for example, couldn't find their way to the bathroom. This is not a unique situation for the U.S. Senate. It is unique in that her vote is so critical and she's so closely watched for that reason. I also think, to be honest, that there was some sexism going on with her for a little while, that she was held before this illness. There were questions about her capacity, her fitness, that were raised that I had not seen raised about male senators, who I can tell you were certainly had less ability to hold a conversation with me than she has. So I think that was operating. I do think this illness really was a bit of a kind of gut punch to her health, and I think we're still seeing how she does. My take right now, there's no change. I think that we're still watching to see if being here affects her decision, but she is a tough cookie. As you can tell by the fact that she's returned up here. It looks like she has trouble seeing because of this illness. But something has driven her to return. There are some Democrats that say it's time for her to go, but she's staying.
Quick break here. We are presented, as always, by Fresh Roasted Coffee. If you could see my screen here. Fresh Roasted Coffee since 2009. This Pennsylvania company has been delivering fresh roasted coffee. You can check out their website at freshroastedcoffee.com or shop them online through a bunch of different places. I'm going to read you something here. Nick, they roast the freshest coffee beans using the most eco-friendly roasting technology on earth. I happen to have a cup right here, fresh roasted coffee. I always record with it. Nick, why don't you tell the people, you're a coffee snob, why don't you tell the people why they should head on down to freshroastedcoffee.com and buy some of this amazing coffee?
First, Mike, let's talk about flavors. If you are a single origin kind of person like you and myself, they've got you. If you are a flavor person, they've got you as well. Flavor packs, individual items as well. And it's not just coffee, folks. You can also get tea. My wife's a tea drinker, so freshroastedcoffee.com's got her too. But more importantly, you can learn about the coffee. When you get to the website, there's a quiz that tells you what's the coffee that's best for you. Sumatra is my blend, and they got that one right. I can tell you that for sure. They'll do the same for you when you head over to the website.
freshroastedcoffee.com. Go to our episode description right now. There's a link right there, and at checkout, you're going to get a discount for this amazing tasting coffee. Head to freshroastedcoffee.com today. And now back to the show. Well, we transitioned with somebody has no respect and no legacy in Representative George Santos out of New York City. What a fantastic segue, by the way, Mike.
Nice. Sweet.
Thank you. So, Lisa, now that George Santos has been formally charged, and we've seen, and I think you have asked some of these questions as well as Manu Raju over there at CNN, Speaker McCarthy and what he is either standing behind George Santos. He keeps repeating the talking point line of he has not put him on any committees. But what are you hearing now in terms of maybe the growing pressures from House Republicans? Are they playing the weight game in terms of the legal process, or are they saying, it's time to have George, we've got a little bit of a cushion here. It's time for him to resign and open that seat back up. What are you hearing from House Republicans? What's the wave swinging in terms of where you think this will ultimately net out as the legal process continues with him? Well,
you are a keen observer of the people up here as well. So I want to hear what you think, especially from Speaker McCarthy's news conference yesterday. I think the House Republicans want him to go. They want him out. They do need his vote, potentially through this debt ceiling fight. They might need him. But I think that they're hoping for a window where he could leave and they could get another Republican in that seat. Speaker McCarthy yesterday talking to us, it was Manu's question right next to me, yesterday said that he wants an ethics investigation. He doesn't want Santos to be expelled this week. There is a movement. We could see a vote today on the House floor to try and expel him. The votes aren't there right now. It takes 2/3 vote. And McCarthy is essentially saying, hold off. Let's wait till an ethics investigation happens. He said he thinks that can happen quickly. I don't know. How did you read that? I read that McCarthy does want Santos out. He doesn't want him out now. He wants a little bit of padding there.
Yeah, I mean, again, the numbers are in their direction right now. And I just think, look at the news cycle and look at the way you've been covering Congress over the past 17, 18 years. There's no scandal bigger than somebody being indicted and now formally charged. And Al Franken resigned for less. I was on a political podcast talking about that just the other day. So, sure. If you just look at where we are right now in terms of accountability and people being held accountable for their actions, who knows how this plays out? I could easily see him staying until 24 and finally something happening with the legal process. Who knows? But I don't. It's weird. It's funny that
I don't know. It seems like I think the ethics committee is usually a toothless tiger here, in Congress, to be honest. They sometimes have value in terms of campaigns, and opposition campaigns will say, oh, the ethics committee found this and this and this about you. But they rarely take action that is significant against members of Congress, and you can judge what significant means. But I think in this case, the message I'm getting is that, McCarthy is telling them, you guys need to have some serious, you should look at whether he should be removed. And that would be exceptional, because as you're right, that an indictment is sort of one of the biggest scandals you can have up here. Most indicted lawmakers, or I should put it this way, there have been, in the past 10 years, I think we've had 7 indicted members of Congress. Most of them had ended up resigning. One of them lost a re-election bid, but those resignations usually came after they were convicted or after they made a plea deal. They don't usually come before that while the indictment is pending. McCarthy knows that, but I think he still wants to find a way to get Santos out, because first, it's bad for Santos is not a great look for the Republican Party. He knows it. That's what you're saying too. And I think he personally doesn't love him. And that's a district Republicans should want to not just win, but they want to make it a full-time, long-term Republican district. And it's one that could go either way if the right candidate shows up for Democrats. So I just am getting a feeling they want him out before a conviction or a guilty plea would happen.
Well, just staying on that for one quick second before I shift topics. I know Representative Richie Torres has introduced the Santos Act, right? And I don't know what the acronym off the top of my head stands for right now, but obviously it's about future George Santos's, ones that have lied in terms of not only their work and career trajectory, but some of their financial earnings and stuff like that. Are you hearing anything momentum wise on that bill, or is that something that's just along partisan lines and probably won't get passed in the House?
I don't know how partisan that is. There is actually some bipartisan interest in reforming the ethics rules and the standards for how members of the House operate. And that comes from Speaker McCarthy and Leader Jeffries. They've been talking about that, trying to set more clear standards or some kind of more clear boundary lines. That's a bipartisan idea. I think that bill at this time does not have a future. But I think that that's one of those things that, and you probably observed it so many times from the assignment desk, that's a seed that's being planted right now. It might take a few years for it to turn into something. But I don't think that bill has a future this Congress, but you never know.
You never know. All right. Well, Lisa, I want to get your takes on this because I want you to relax for me for a little bit here.
Oh,
take the TV hat off. Forget the cameras are here. There's no microphone.
That usually means you want me to say something like that I'll regret.
No, absolutely not. So our last episode was around the CNN town hall with former President Trump. I saw one of your tweets that caught my eye where you were talking about, you were having, I guess, this philosophical, maybe internal debate about whether or not you would live tweet about it. And we've done episodes here. I've done a few on media literacy. We've had Ron Filipkowski on the program, who obviously covers a lot of right-wing extremism media. And one of the questions I had asked to him was about platforming some of this stuff, right? And why are you doing it and giving them ample and re-amplifying what they're saying? And he said something to the effect of, I'm clipping out segments that are making them look bad so people can see how they look bad. And it's very short. I'm going through 2-3 hours worth of tape to get into a 45-second minute clip for Twitter. And that kind of stayed with me. And keeping in that same theme, I'm thinking now about why CNN would have the former president of the United States on. Obviously, like I just said, he is the former president of the United States. He is obviously potentially the front runner right now for the GOP in 2024. So giving him a platform to speak in a town hall setting, maybe the format is wrong, but I want to get your takes on why you chose not to really cover it and talk about it. And what do you make of platforming something like that in prime time, given the format? A town hall audience, we all know how that's crafted, right? Questions are pre-plotted. Everything is kind of to the discretion of the Trump campaign, lesser effect to the news network because one side's going to pull out of that. What was your overall read on it and why you decided not to live tweet about it?
Well, I don't think this is your saying, but I know CNN had complete control over the questions, right? I know that they did. And I believe they also had control over the audience, which is another part of debate, I think, over how CNN handled this. So why did I not live tweet? to me, I guess my equivalent answer to what I'm doing when I'm tweeting is, what can I add to the conversation? I mean, what am I doing something that like can add to thought, or is a question or something that I think expands thought and brings some light? Every now and then, I'll get passionate about something and kind of it'll be more heat than light. But most of the time for me, I'm just trying to shed light. Sometimes I'm trying to be clever. Sometimes I'm trying to be thoughtful. But I just want something that sheds light. And I also think something we do at NewsHour, I'm not trying to promote us, but one reason I love working for us is we're not trying to raise everybody's blood pressure. Like we're not trying to just be like sensation. We're having guys, here's something we're saying, react, I'm reacting, you react to me reacting. Like there's too much of that. And there's plenty of people doing that. I think there's a bit of a pack mentality in journalism. It's a natural thing, but I'm always looking to figure out, okay, what isn't being said? What aren't we covering? What's a kind of way of saying something that could add to the conversation? And I just think with Trump, I was our Trump reporter in 2016. At that point, it was important to really document and really look closely at everything he was saying. It still is important to do that, but it was new, and Americans were still sort of figuring out, who is this guy? What is he about? I think now, we know this is someone who, like George Santos, has no problem telling lies for his own benefit when he needs to. He seems to believe those lies once he says them. And I'm not saying the former president always lies. I'm just saying we can document that he has lied. That's clear. We know who he is. We also know his view of America. We know a lot of things about why the base likes him. For substantive reasons, and also for personality reasons, and also for what they think he represents. And we can get into all those debates. They're all very important. But I just wanted to see, is there going to be something new here that is adding to the conversation? And very quickly, when you're watching that interview, town hall, you could tell it was the opposite, that it almost felt like sometimes you watch events and you're like, I'm losing brain cells right now. I'm losing, our collective soul is getting smaller. We're not getting smarter. We're not getting bigger. We're getting smaller. And I think just when it's back and forth like that, not just between Trump, between anybody and a journalist, occasionally that's useful, but usually it just makes everyone look bad. Usually there's not a way to get out of that. And I think that's a signature of our time right now in journalism. I look back to the founders of NewsHour, like Jim Lehrer, Robin McNeil. I thought about that Trump interview. I said, man, I wish one of those guys had done it, because first of all, there's a gender thing with Trump too that you have to take into effect, I think, with Caitlin Collins that she was dealing with. But there's also a Trump versus CNN thing as well. But I think so it's not just because they were guys, but I think that they had this sort of sometimes good, sometimes bad, but in this case good way of interviewing that was very kind of had this sort of laid back, I'm not getting pulled in, I'm not taking the bait. I think journalists take the bait a little bit too much right now, and they think that they can fight in the same way that Trump is fighting, but you can't. It's not, you don't fight like that. And so I think I think it was Robin McNeil that did an interview with Fidel Castro at one point, and I'm sorry if it was Jim Lehrer, it might have been. It was one of those guys, and just a classic kind of madman style. He's just sitting back in an armchair with Fidel. So, Senor Castro, it was a very serious interview, but it was like the opposite of combative, which actually brought out, I think, more of the problems with Castro and really put him on his heels more, because it was sort of like, I'm not going to elevate this tornado of sort of emotion and sensation that you do. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to just step back and say, but wait a minute, hold on. Now, I don't know if anything could work with Trump. Trump is Trump. He's going to answer everything he wants. He's going to attack anyone who asks him a negative question. But for all those reasons, I kind of just wanted to step back and do the okay, wait a minute, I'm going to keep my cool here, and I just didn't think there was anything that added to the conversation from that.
Listen, Adding to the discourse is the purpose of this show. Confrontational
Yay, see?
journalism.
I'm so happy to be here. Yeah.
Confrontational journalism is something I do not strive for, nor do I want to do. I want to have serious people on the program. We talk to people who know what they're talking about, and it feeds in perfectly into Lisa Desjardins and the team over at NewsHour. You can check out all of her work over at pbs.org or check your local listings in time for when NewsHour airs. Lisa, I can't thank you enough for coming on the program today. Continued success to you, and please stay safe.
Thank you so much. You too.
Hey, thanks for watching the Can We Please Talk podcast. Whatever clip you just watched, we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stick around for some more. Subscribe to the channel. My partner's over here smashing the button. Come on, do him a favor. So hit subscribe.